My name is Adam Phillips. I was trained as a child psychotherapist and I worked in the National Health Service for 17 years. And for the last 18 years, I've been a psychoanalyst in private practice and a writer. Welcome to my ex. When I worked as a child psychotherapist in the Department of Child Psychiatry at Charing Cross Hospital in London, we developed a new technique, not really a technique, but a sort of method for interviewing new patients. Now, normally in a medical context, you take a medical history when you meet the patient for the first time. One of the things we tried out was, instead of taking, or sometimes as well as taking, a straightforward medical history, we asked people to tell us the story of their relationship to help. Now, in a way, it seems like a simple thing. It's clear, if you give this a moment's thought, that obviously we've spent our whole lives being helped in different ways. And yet we often don't think very much about our actual relationship to the wish to be helped, the need to be helped, and our capacity to bear being helped. Because one of the striking things about being helped is that in order to be helped, you have to acknowledge there's something you can't do for yourself, and there's something you need somebody else for. And these are two very, very powerful and fundamentally formative experiences. Because one of the ways of describing a life, right from the beginning, is in terms of dependence. That a baby is absolutely dependent on his mother and father and family and so on. And so you can think of a life as one in which one grows from a state of absolute dependence to relative independence. I can only live my life in a state of need and want. And what that means is something to do with what we call as adults being helped. And so I think what interests me is to think about where are the areas in our lives where we can actually bear and enjoy and want to be helped? And where are the areas of our lives where we sort of assume we can't be helped or don't want help? And what might it be about someone that would make them resist being helped? In other words, what are the fears about being helped? What are the drawbacks? What are the compromises? What are the self-betrayals in actually acknowledging there's something you need help with and actually asking for it? Two really quite profound things. Because every time I ask somebody for something, I'm acknowledging I don't already have it. I'm acknowledging a lack of self-sufficiency. And that means having to face the fact that I need somebody who I can't control. And there's something very daunting about that project. So if I want to learn to play the piano, I will need a piano teacher. But I will also have to bear with the fact that my piano teacher will not be under remote control. I will not have them when I want them. I'll have to negotiate an arrangement. And on the one hand, you could think, well, this is straightforward and practical and pragmatic. That's what we do. But actually, it's much more difficult than it looks. Because what happens if I want a piano lesson when the piano teacher is not there? Or what happens if I don't like my piano teacher? Or what happens if I begin to think, I don't want to learn to play the piano? You can see that I'm embroiled now in a network of difficulties about being helped. So I think that in a way, real help, what I take to be real help, is based fundamentally on care for another person, a capacity to make realistic promises to the other person, and also an ability to bear somebody else's suffering. In other words, the project here is not simply to abolish somebody's suffering because you can't bear it. It's actually the capacity to be able to enter into it and to contain it, to be able to actually listen to somebody's account of what they're suffering from. Because the risk always is that the listener can't bear the story and so wants to fob the person off prematurely with a drug or a treatment. Whereas actually it might require a good deal of patient listening. And of course, there are limited human resources. But I do think that the quality of a society depends upon their relationship to the most vulnerable people in that society. And I think that it seems to me, and there may be lots of good and bad reasons for this, that a lot of people have been left feeling radically unprotected in this COVID crisis. Partly inevitably because there are limited resources, but partly because people have been very selective about who's been treatable and who's been treated. Clearly, it's much better to be rich with COVID than to be poor. It sounds like, much better to be white with COVID than black. And all these differential variables have to be included in a total picture. Otherwise, in this case, the COVID virus simply becomes politics by other means. It becomes another way of continuing the fundamental exploitation of the culture. I think the power question in terms of helping and being helped is the fundamental question. And I think I would put it in psychoanalytic language, which is, how can we avoid having sadomasochistic relationships? And what I mean by that is, how can we avoid some person making themselves feel strong by making somebody else feel weak? And it would seem to me one of the preconditions for genuine help is that there would be no bullying, that there would be no domination, no need for the patient to submit. Because one of the fundamental questions that helping and being helped raises is, what is power and how's power going to be used? Because, of course, as a doctor, you have an immense amount of power, but you might have so much power that the patient is too frightened to speak freely to the doctor, because they depend upon the doctor's willingness to help. So we're always going to be caught up in this question of, what am I allowed to say and go on being able to have the relationship I need with a person who can help me? Because free speech and being helped don't tend to go very easily together. That is a big problem.